Hello and welcome to ET Auto and to another episode of Target Net Zero, an exclusive discussion series with industry leaders from across the globe on the very important topic of carbon neutrality. In today's episode, our guest is Mr. Henrik Fisker, an accomplished car designer and entrepreneur who is now all set to launch his first vehicle from Fisker Inc. later this year. So Henrik is the chairman of Fisker Inc. And it's my pleasure and honor to welcome you, Henrik, to this show.
Thank you. It's great to be on the show, Sumantra.
Henrik, we are in the beginning of the year, a key year for you, for Fisker Inc. So tell us how's been the journey in terms of preparation for the market debut of the first model from Fisker Inc., the Fisker Ocean SUV. You first showcased it about 2 years ago at the CES. You showcased it this time, earlier this month. So how's been the response and how much of iterations has it gone through so far?
Well, first of all, already the car industry is a difficult industry, and it doesn't help when you start a car company in the middle of COVID in this pandemic. So we've been public in 2020, started Fisker Inc. in October. We raised over $1 billion, and then we, at that point, went full speed on the electric Fisker Ocean. And we had some very ambitious targets of not only making the world's most, sustainable and cool electric SUV, but also we want to make it affordable. We want to include features which have never been made before, like California mode, solar roof, etc. And also, we wanted to, quite frankly, make a vehicle that had a longer range than any other vehicle in our price segment, including the Tesla Model Y. And we achieved that. The range in kilometers is 630 kilometers, according to the European drive cycle, and here in the US, over 350 miles, according to the EPA drive cycle. So we achieved that, and we are doing all the final testing now. We have prototypes running off the line at Magna Steyr in Austria, which is very exciting. I'm flying over there in February, where I'm going to hopefully drive off a car off the production line. So that's exciting. And then I might be flying to India in March, where we have just set up a software development center, and we expect to hire about 300 people in India this year. So everything is going really good. We had a great reception at CES, where we showed that we're going to have the world's first digital radar in our autonomous driving system that we call FI Pilot. And that will be standard in our vehicle in November, actually 5 of them digital radars. And we're going to have quite an amazing autonomous system in our vehicle.
So the digital radar technology you claimed is the first, it would be the first in the Fisker Ocean, and it will be a standard feature?
It'll be the first, standard. It'll be the first in any vehicle in the world. And I think it really is going to set a new standard in the autonomous space. And we're keeping sort of quiet about the exact features that we're going to offer, but there's some super amazing features, and I'm really excited about it.
Good to know about the developments and the Fisker Ocean project shaping up well, and pilot production already started. But if now, since we are talking about carbon neutrality in this show, tell us, Henrik, electric vehicles, sustainability, carbon neutrality. How much of contribution, what the scope the EV industry can play towards enhancing the sustainability of the automotive industry, and thereby not simultaneously also contribute towards reducing its carbon footprint, if not helping it become carbon neutral?
It's just like we have seen through the years of development of new technologies. There's always an initial resistance and a doubt about how fast it's truly going to go. I remember when a neighbor when I was living in Denmark, where I grew up, had the first color TV, and everybody's going, who needs color in a TV? And now everybody has it, and it went really quick. And then it became the flat screen TV, who needs a telephone or a smartphone without buttons? And suddenly, that is standard. I think we are now at a very important point in the automotive industry where it has been decided that we are going electric. There's no force in this world that can stop us going electric. We got the world's largest car company, Volkswagen, which have already announced they're not going to make any gasoline engines after 2026. We got legislation all over Europe, some countries that as early as 2025, in 3 years, will not allow a sale of a new gasoline and diesel car. We got a major legislation that I expect to happen here in the US this year as well. So when all this is happening, there's no country that can resist this by themselves, because then they're going to fall behind if they don't have this technology. So I think what's important and what's going to happen this year is this huge transition towards electrification. Now, of course, we need product out there. We need an infrastructure. But that acceleration is going to happen over the next 3 years. I expect here in the US and in Europe, by end of 2024, we'll have a complete infrastructure of charging stations. And unfortunately, what's going to happen is it's going to leave some countries, specifically in the developing world, that's going to be left behind because they have spent time building out a gasoline infrastructure, and now they have to invest in a whole new infrastructure. And I think whoever is leading those countries should think about that, because the only way you can keep up is if you develop that electric infrastructure, because you're only going to be able to buy those electric vehicles after 2030. There is no major car company that's going to make any significant volume of gasoline cars after 2030. So this is a huge revolution that's happening. We're a part of it. I hope we can lead it. And we're spending a lot of time developing many different models for the future.
Right. We'll talk about that. I'm very curious to understand what would be the product roadmap for Fisker Inc. But having said that, it's increasingly being believed that electric is the future for the automotive industry. How, at the same time, the impact on the supply chain or on the resources, on the environment. There are already reports that maybe lithium ion prices seem to be again creeping up again because of the demand supply kind of mismatch. And some reports also suggest that perhaps by the end of this decade, there might be a scarcity of certain key raw materials. So that, if you look at the entire value chain, how can that be sustained as the electrification megatrend grows?
So I remember in 1974, we had an oil crisis, and the prediction was in 1974 that in 10 years, we're going to run out of oil. In 1984, we didn't run out of oil. There was new technologies that was developed to go deeper down, find more oil, and we have never run out of oil. So we are exactly at the same point with these raw materials. There's a lot of speculation out there. There's a lot of negative sentiments. There's a lot of fake propaganda that wants to try and stop electrification, and it's unstoppable. I've dug very deep into this. I sat on the board of a cobalt mining company in Canada, which is one of the countries that have the most mining companies. And what I found out and what I learned there was incredible. For example, cobalt is a byproduct of, for example, silver mining. It's not a main product that you mine. And in fact, this particular company have one of the largest cobalt mines in the US. It's not in action yet, but we already know in the US there's plenty of cobalt, there's plenty of lithium. It just hasn't been developed. So as we move forward, it will be developed, and there is enough of these materials, and we don't have to go to Congo and use slave labor and all these horror stories. Yes. These are things that are horror stories to try and see if we could stop electrification, just like somebody thought we were going to stop, the use of oil in 1974. That isn't happening. Electrification is happening, and as we move forward, we'll even get rid of some of these rare earth materials. I mean, in your own country, you got, I believe he's the richest man, Mukesh Ambani, is already starting to turn towards renewable energy because he obviously has foresight and realizing this is where it's going. So it's happening all over the world, even in developing countries. China is at the forefront. They're pushing for the entire industry to go electric. So, those are stories that in the meantime are old, they're boring, and they have no relevance.
Talking specifically about lithium, lithium ion is the current workhorse of the overall EV industry globally. It's the most favorite battery technology. Again, lithium mining, as I understand, also kind of requires a lot of, let's say, for example, one particular water, and it consumes a lot of water. And also in terms of the lithium reserves, no, they are not unlimited across the world. Given this scenario, are you also kind of developing other technologies, battery technologies that you're looking at? What is the scope you see for new battery technologies? And at Fisker Inc., what kind of technologies are developing?
Well, again, just like with oil, people said oil wasn't unlimited, but we still have plenty of oil. Lithium iron is an undiscovered, and it hasn't been a material that anybody really spent a lot of time digging out of the ground. We just have found here in California one of the biggest deposits of lithium ion. So I can guarantee you there's plenty of lithium ion all over the world. It just hasn't been explored yet. So I'm not worried about that. Secondly, we got new technologies to work on this lithium ion to make it more efficient to get it out, to use less energy to work on it, and eventually we will have batteries that probably doesn't even use lithium ion. There's a lot of development going on. I am, however, the opinion that where we are right now, we have to remember that the lithium ion batteries have been under development for probably at least 15 years when it comes to automotive. I was one of the early ones out when it was just Fisker and Tesla looking at lithium ion batteries back in 2009 and 10. And that was the kind of start of using lithium ion batteries. And they're really just matured in the last 5 years. And now we have big companies like, CATL in China, which we have signed a contract with, or you've got the Korean companies, some Japanese. And, this technology now, these companies have invested billions of dollars. So we are not going to see a transition to another new technology in the next 7 years. That isn't going to happen. Even if the brightest guy in the world or woman invents a new battery next week, that battery is going to have to go through testing. It has to go through a whole bunch of development and scaling up before that even gets into production. And nobody's going to invest billions of dollars in that. So it'll be at least 7 years before you see a new technology. And for the next 7 years, we have plenty of raw materials. We're going to have plenty of capacity in Europe. Several factories are being set up all over Europe to produce lithium-ion batteries. Here in the US, again, several factories are being set up. It's happening all over the world, in China as well. So we are going to electrification, whether somebody likes it or not. It's happening. And I think it's really good for the world. It's going to be a cleaner world. It means that each country can elect how they want to provide their energy, whether it's sustainable or whether other resource they want to use until they obviously transition into sustainable energy. But it's going to mean more independence. It's going to mean ultimately way cleaner environment, specifically locally. And it probably is going to mean better economies for local countries or local municipalities as well.
Sticking to technology very briefly, your take on the sodium-ion battery technology, because that is one topic which is being increasingly discussed. In fact, you talked about battery manufacturers. CATL themselves have invested in sodium-ion technology battery manufacturing. So, what is your take on sodium-ion technology?
So we have already announced that we are launching the Fisker Ocean with lithium iron phosphate as the base battery, and then we are going to have NMC in our top version. And the difference between the two technologies is that lithium iron phosphate is a lot safer, so you don't need quite as much complicated cooling and other kind of monitoring of the battery. Secondly, it is a lot lower cost. The disadvantage is it's not as energy dense. But if you have enough volume, if the volumetric mix or the volumetric space in your vehicle is big enough, it's not an issue. So when we designed the Fisker Ocean, we made sure that we had the capacity and the volume to get a great range, even with our LFP, our lithium iron phosphate battery. So our lithium iron phosphate battery will still get you 440 miles of range, which is probably class leading for the price and the size of our vehicle. And it gives us a huge price advantage, which means we do have probably the lowest cost SUV in the world at this point, starting here in the US is $37,500.
Henrik, in one of the earlier episodes of this show, we had Dr. Andy Palmer, who himself is a very strong proponent of electric vehicles and now is the vice chairman of Switch Mobility. However, he also said that governments should not pick winners in terms of a particular technology. In the context of what he meant was electric is a good choice, but don't write other technologies off. He was talking about this Darwinism approach, challenging engineers, challenging R&D guys to develop new technologies, even in the ICE space maybe, and thereby help reduce the carbon footprint and let the best technology win, or the best solution, or maybe a bouquet of solutions help the industry move ahead faster towards the goal of carbon neutrality. What's your take?
So reality is that people all over the world, they want the latest technology, but they want it to be affordable. And what we see in every segment of technology, whether it's a mobile phone, whether it's a television screen, that people want, ultimately, they want that technology, but they want it to be cheap. And it can only be cheap if it's mass produced and if there's somewhat of a commonality. So for example, maybe not many people here remember, but we had a big fight between Sony, which were doing VHS tapes, and then we had Betamax, which were done by somebody else. And in the end of the day, one of them had to win because you couldn't afford to run with two systems. So the reality is we can't afford to run with multiple systems. We have to build out infrastructures. You can't have, imagine you go out and buy a car and now you're looking at 5 different fueling stations, hydrogen, electricity, gasoline, diesel, maybe 2 other types. Where do you go? Who's going to provide this energy? How much are you selling? It would be crazy. This is not a restaurant where you have a menu between tacos or, Indian food and Italian food. And even Indian food, Italian food, are usually 2 different restaurants. But again, this is not even mass produced. It's made by hand by a cook. When we talk about something like laying out an infrastructure with $1 million fueling stations, you cannot afford to have an infrastructure times 5. It just doesn't work. We could barely afford in the world to have gasoline and diesel. And those 2 technologies were still fairly close. A diesel engine, a gasoline engine, there's still a lot of components that are similar and they use the same gearbox, et cetera. But, electric powertrain have nothing to do with a gasoline powertrain. So we can't afford to have all these different technologies. So I believe that the consumer are already about to choose electrification, and is followed by the governments around the world in the biggest countries with the most sale of vehicles. And they realize that if these countries have to invest, they have to concentrate on one technology. Think about India. We still are waiting for India to invest into an electric infrastructure. Imagine if you go and ask the Indian government to say, by the way, we know you need to spend $1 trillion in electrification, but actually you would like to spend $5 trillion on 5 different sources of energy to supply to people. They would go, hold on a minute. We don't even have 1 billion. Now you're going to ask us for 5 billion. This isn't going to work. So it sounds really good, but reality is it's not going to work. It is going to be electrification. That's just where we're going. Just like it was gasoline that was chosen 100 years ago. By the way, over electrification. We did have electric cars 100 years ago, but gasoline was chosen.
In fact, the first electric car, if I'm not wrong, was developed before the first ICE vehicle. But then, as they say, the rest is history. Talking about the Indian government, Henrik, and talking about energy source, the Indian government is also talking about adopting a larger, higher blend of ethanol maybe eventually going to flex fuel also. So I think that's another kind of challenge or roadmap that we are kind of going to witness here. But that's a topic for another discussion. The three R's of reduce, reuse, and recycle, very, very key for the automotive industry to focus now than perhaps ever before, given the kind of environment and the global challenges that we are facing in terms of climate change and other challenges. So, I mean, from what I have learned earlier, the Fisker Ocean is an interesting example of using a lot of recycled materials. And I mean, it's, as I understand, kind of pitching sustainability as it's one of its core feature, not feature, but a core kind of attribute. So tell us, how are you moving ahead on that front in terms of starting with the Ocean, with the future models, to ensure that when it comes to sustainability, when it comes to recycled products, recyclability of the whole vehicle, how can you sustain that?
Well, when you want to disrupt an industry, it's obviously very difficult, but one of the things you have to do is bring the suppliers with you. So we have spent a lot of time with many different suppliers to convert them into creating products for us that is recyclable. And sometimes we found some suppliers which are not even automotive suppliers, and we convert them into becoming an automotive supplier. And that goes from everything to, for example, all our carpets are made from recycled plastic bottles from the ocean. And quite frankly, I'm very sad to see how pollutive our oceans are across the world. You go on a beautiful beach and you see all this garbage coming up on the beach. It's terrible. And we need to do something about it. And if we can use some of that ocean waste to make good, I think that's something the car industry should do. It's something we want to do. The car industry is one of the most polluting industries in the world, from everything to how it manufactures, produces the materials, and of course the usage of these vehicles. So if we want these vehicles and if we want private mobility to be part of our future, we have to change it. And that's what we are doing at Fisker. And I truly believe in it. It's not going to happen overnight. And I can't tell you right now that we have 100% CO2 neutral vehicle. What I can tell you is that our vehicle is built in 100% CO2 neutral factory in Austria, 100% powered by hydro and solar. What I can tell you is that our entire interior is vegan, and we are using as many, recycled materials as we can, and we're using glue that is less toxic. We even came up with wheels that are made of aluminum and recycled carbon fiber, which nobody's ever done. So, we're trying to pioneer this, and I think it's a start and hopefully an igniter for other companies to follow. And that's what we're here to do. And I think we have a lot of customers. We got over 25,000 reservations across the world, even some from India. And, we see that people really, they like this idea of being able to actually join in and support this effort.
Right. And when it comes to sourcing them from a long-term perspective, how are you ensuring that this kind of recycled materials are available for you?
Well, first, I don't think there's a lack of garbage from the ocean. There's plenty of plastic bottles being fished out of the ocean. We don't have to worry about that. So we haven't seen any supply lack of recycled materials. In fact, we haven't seen any lack in our supply chain so far. We have a great relationship, of course, with Magna Steyr. We got a deal with Foxconn for chips and other things. So we are on target to deliver our vehicle in November this year. And I haven't seen any lack of anywhere in the supply chain so far. And we're lucky about that.
So tell us, Henrik, now this whole pitch about sustainability, I want to understand more from your perspective. You are also, as I see it, you're also trying to use this sustainability pitch to also as a differentiator for Fisker vehicles, because at the end of the day, Fisker vehicles will also be another set of electric vehicles, but trying to get a different identity for itself. So how are you going to build on this sustainability pitch?
So, this is more than talk and marketing. We are very serious about sustainability at Fisker. We have set up a council, a sustainability council, or ESG council, actually, where we have Nikolai Coster-Waldau on, which is, by the way, he played Jaime on Game of Thrones, famous actor, but he's also sustainability ambassador at the UN. We have adopted the UN sustainability guidelines, and I wrote a letter to the head of UN on that. And we have been accepted into this, and we are following those guidelines. We also have internally a group of people which are going out to our suppliers, and we're giving them clear guidelines of what they have to do to become a supplier to Fisker. So this is something where you have to dig deep, and you have to work with suppliers, you have to work with all the stakeholders to actually create a fully sustainable vehicle. And our goal is in 2027 to create a fully carbon neutral vehicle. Now that's going to be difficult. It's a really tough goal. I don't know if you're going to get there, but I put that goal in and I'm pushing our team to do it. It's a long road there, but if we don't start, we'll never get there. We can sit at home on our couch and talk about walking up the mountain, but if we don't actually put the shoes on and start walking, we'll never get to the top.
Right. So 2027 is the target for Fisker Inc. to reach the target of net zero.
Yeah.
Talking about your business expansion, your market reach, starting November, as you said, you'll start rolling out the Fisker Ocean, the first vehicle from Fisker Inc. While we're talking about the Fisker Ocean, could you very briefly tell us what is the kind of product roadmap that you have lined up? What frequency would you look at introducing new products?
So the Fisker Ocean is a premium SUV, even though it's affordable. But we're going to initially start about 45,000, 50,000 vehicles a year with Magna Steyr in Europe. I foresee we are going up to 150,000 vehicles a year within the next couple of years. We definitely see the demand for it. Then in 2024, we're going to be launching a vehicle called the Fisker Pair, which is going to be a really radical, I would almost say mobility device, full of technology. It'll not look like any vehicle you have seen today. It's super advanced. It's like a little spaceship on wheels. It's very cool. And we are working together with Foxconn, where Foxconn is going to produce this vehicle. And here in the US, they have capacity to close to 500,000 vehicles a year. The plan with Foxconn is to produce this vehicle both in China, Europe, and India. And why India and China? Because this vehicle will start under $30,000. So it'll be very affordable, yet spacious, with new type of storage spaces, new type of technology that's not seen in this segment. And we can really only accomplish that if we eventually make 1 million vehicles a year. And that's objective with the Project Pair. So those are the two most important vehicles that we are planning before 2025. We are planning 2 more vehicles, which is more in the upper segment, sort of, supercars and other cool vehicles. But the Pair and the Ocean are really the foundation of the company.
Earlier, and let's come to India now. You touched upon India earlier in the interview also. Tell us, where does India stand in your overall scheme of things in terms of your overall business plans? As a market, as a sourcing base, maybe as a technology development base also?
So, I've said this before. I think what is really exciting, by the way, my wife's from India. So, I've been to India many times. And I think one of the really amazing things about India is emphasis on education. And I think when you look at the Indian population, the Indian market, they're extremely tech savvy. And I think India at one point, and I think nobody really knows when, but at one point it's going to explode when it comes to the adoption of electrification. Of course, the government has a big role in that, but I do think there's going to be a pressure from the general population at one point in time to go electric. It makes a lot of sense because of pollution, cost of electricity, et cetera, et cetera. Nobody really knows when that's going to happen, but I hope, and my prediction is that I think we will get to India with production of the Fisker Pair with Foxconn before Tesla starts production of their vehicles in India.
Okay, and have you started negotiations with state governments on potential sites where has Foxconn initiated that to identify potential site?
Well, we already chose now a site for a development center in India, in Hyderabad, and we already have set up the company in India. We already started hiring people in India, and we're going to send out a press release shortly in the next weeks about this facility where we're going to start hiring people. When it comes to actual manufacturing, we have not chosen a place yet. I don't think we need to choose it yet, but I would say that I think that the facility most likely will be a ground-up facility, and I think we're going to need to also make batteries next to this facility because everything needs to be done in India to make it efficient, cost efficient. And I think that the vehicle we have is perfectly tailored for India because of the size, the spaciousness, the technology in this vehicle. It's really designed as a world vehicle that will really appeal to tech-savvy, futuristic thinking people all over the world.
So, are you saying that the PAIR project will be the first one to be launched in India, not the Ocean? Because earlier you had received some bookings for the Ocean also from India.
I think we'll import the Ocean to India. You know, it's a luxury vehicle, and I think you need a certain volume. But once we set up a factory in India, we can obviously probably produce many different vehicles. But the focus for high volume in India would definitely be the PAIR because of the pricing.
Okay, and could you just give a flavor of what is the price point, price range it could fall in, and what kind of capacity would you look at, install capacity to begin with?
Well, so the price. Well, I don't have the Indian currency exchange in my mind, but the price for the Fisker PAIR will be under $30,000. So it will be comparable to to vehicles which are from Kia, Hyundai, and vehicles like that, which are selling quite a lot of in India. So I think we'll be extremely price competitive if we end up when we end up making our vehicle in India. And what was the real key here is you got to have a product that people are excited about, that people want. We're not making just another car. We are making the future mobility device, and that's really the key here. We are redefining what mobility will be in the future, and I think that's the exciting part about this vehicle.
And how key a role with the new India Technology Center that you have just set up play in your overall global plans? And could you just give an idea of in terms of what are the kind of technology that they're working on, and what's the kind of eventual team strength that you look at in India?
Well, we don't want to give all the secrets away, but obviously software development is a big strength in India. So we definitely are looking for a lot of software developers. That's going to be one of the key attributes of this center. Okay.
We have come to the end of this very, very interesting discussion. Thank you for sparing your time, Henrik. Before we go, your last words on the carbon neutrality story for the automotive mobility industry. How do you see it progressing here on? Do you see the overall journey getting accelerated, and what in that journey the role of the electrification and hybridization maybe?
Well, I don't think there's a choice. If we want private mobility in the future, we got to go electric. We got to become sustainable. I think we are close to the inflection point. I believe the inflection point will be somewhere around 2025. And what I mean by that is the point where you flip extremely quickly to the other side. And it happened in the mobile phone industry. Everybody had a Nokia phone. In fact, I would have people from India send me the latest Nokia phone because they had it before we had it in the US for some reason. I don't know why, but they did. And there was 100 different models and all that, and they dominated the world, and so did Motorola. And overnight, that entire company or these companies disappeared. I do see the same is going to happen in the automotive industry. I think you're going to see in the next 5 years to 7 years that some of the largest traditional car companies in the world are going to shrink. Some might even disappear. And you're going to see some other ones accelerating. I mean, look, the most valuable company today is a new EV company, right? The fastest acceleration company today is an EV company. In fact, in the US, we now have 5 super valuable EV companies. So, you know, and in China, by the way, the same thing. So I think that it's very clear we are moving in a direction where we are going to have sustainable mobility. I think it's going to expand. I think what's going to happen is we're going to essentially divide the market into 2, to be very simple. There's going to be the sort of boring transportation market of buses and taxis and main, you know, mobility that people want. And then there's going to be the exciting side where you're going to use emotions, technology, design, and desire. That's the side we want to be in. And I think that's going to happen in all price classes, just like food. Even if you want to buy, you know, a super cheap meal, that doesn't mean it can't be a great meal, that it can't be a fantastic meal. You can go out to the street in India and get some of the best food in the world. It doesn't have to be made by a 3-star Michelin chef. And that's why I still believe emotional, exciting vehicles don't have to be expensive.
Indeed. That's a good thought to end this episode with, and wishing you and your team all the very best. Henrik, always a pleasure talking to you.
Good to see you again, Samantha. Take care.
Take care, and thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for tuning into this episode of Target Net Zero. We were in conversation with Henrik Fisker, Chairman, Fisker Inc. So thank you very much for watching, and please take care and stay safe. Goodbye.